The lecture hall smelled like chalk dust and old wood, the kind of smell that clings to institutions convinced of their own importance. It was the third week of September, and the morning light came through tall windows in sharp angles, cutting across rows of students who were already half defeated before the semester had truly begun. Advanced Differential Equations, the hardest course in the mathematics department at Hargrove University. And at the back of the room, in the last seat of the last row, sat a young man named Ezekiel Owusu, quietly arranging his notebook, his pencil already moving before the professor had even entered the room. Ezekiel had grown up in a two-bedroom apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, where the radiator groaned through winter nights and his mother worked double shifts at a hospital laundry facility. There were no tutors, no test prep courses, no legacy admission. There was only a battered library card, a stack of mathematics textbooks he had checked out so many times the librarian had quietly set them aside for him, and a mind that, from the age of 7, had moved through numbers the way some people move through music, not learning it, but breathing it. He had arrived at Hargrove on a full academic scholarship. He had not told anyone this. He did not carry it like a banner. He simply showed up each morning, sat in the back, and worked. If you enjoyed this story so far, please hit the like button. It truly helps this channel continue sharing stories that matter. The door to the lecture hall swung open with the particular authority that belongs to men who have never once doubted their place in a room. Professor Gerald Whitmore entered carrying a leather briefcase, his silver hair swept back, his posture the posture of a man used to being the most intelligent person present. He had been teaching at Hargrove for 31 years. He had published 4 textbooks. He had a named chair. He had, over the decades, developed a very particular instinct for identifying which students belonged in his classroom and which were merely passing through on their way to a more modest future. He scanned the room the way a man scans a menu, with mild interest and no great expectations. His gaze moved through the rows with practiced efficiency until it landed, briefly, on Ezekiel. Something about the sight of the young man seemed to register in a way Whitmore did not bother to conceal. He noted the worn sneakers, the second-hand backpack, the quiet way Ezekiel sat apart from the clusters of students who had already begun forming the social architecture of the semester. Whitmore looked away without expression and set his briefcase on the desk. He began the lecture on partial differential equations. He was, in his way, a brilliant teacher, structured, precise, demanding. He moved through material at a pace designed to separate the serious from the casual. Most students were writing frantically. A few had already developed the glazed expression of people who have made a wrong turn and are too proud to admit it. Ezekiel was not writing frantically. He was writing slowly, in the methodical way of someone checking rather than chasing, someone who already knows the destination and is simply confirming the route. Whitmore noticed this too. On the 4th day of class, during a session on boundary value problems, Whitmore paused mid-lecture and looked toward the back of the room. "You," he said, not a name, just the word. His eyes were on Ezekiel. "You in the back, what is the general solution to the equation I just wrote?" The room went quiet. Students turned. Ezekiel looked at the board, then at his notebook, then back at the board. He answered, correctly, completely, without hesitation. Whitmore stared at him for a moment. Then he turned back to the board and continued as though nothing of significance had happened. But something had shifted in him, and not in the direction of respect. Gerald Whitmore had spent 3 decades building a mental taxonomy of students, and Ezekiel Owusu did not fit neatly into any of his existing categories. This bothered him in a way he could not quite articulate, so he translated it, as people often do, into suspicion. The boy had memorized something. He had gotten lucky. He had perhaps seen the problem before. These were the explanations Whitmore chose, and once chosen, they hardened quickly into certainty. The following week, Whitmore began doing something new. Small things at first. He would call on Ezekiel for the most difficult questions in the session. He would phrase those questions in ways that added unnecessary complexity, angles not covered in the assigned reading, traps set in the language of the problem itself. And when Ezekiel answered, Whitmore would respond not with acknowledgement but with a slight narrowing of the eyes, a barely perceptible tightening of the mouth, as though the correct answer was itself somehow suspicious. Other students noticed. Priya Mehta, who sat 2 rows in front of Ezekiel and who was herself formidably gifted, turned around after one of these exchanges and gave Ezekiel a look that said she saw exactly what was happening. Ezekiel gave her a small, steady smile and looked back at his notebook. He did not complain. He did not speak to anyone about it. He went home to his small dormitory room each evening, cooked instant noodles on an electric burner that was technically against regulations, and worked through mathematics problems the way some people work through prayer, not because it was required, but because it was the thing that made the world make sense. Then came the morning that would change everything. It was a Tuesday in October, overcast, the campus trees beginning to let go of their leaves. Whitmore arrived in the lecture hall with a different energy, something charged in his step, something that the more perceptive students registered as theatrical. He set down his briefcase, turned to the board, and wrote out an equation. He wrote it slowly, deliberately, with the satisfaction of someone setting a trap they are confident no one will escape. It was not an equation from the syllabus. It was not from any standard textbook. It was a problem Whitmore had encountered in a graduate-level research paper 20 years earlier, a problem that had stumped doctoral candidates, a problem that existed in that narrow band of mathematics where the tools of the classroom begin to give way to the frontiers of what is currently known. There were components of it that drew on advanced topology, elements that required familiarity with a particular branch of functional analysis that no undergraduate had any business touching. Whitmore turned from the board and looked directly at Ezekiel. "Mr. Owusu," he said, the name used now like a small blade. "Since you seem so comfortable in this class, perhaps you would like to come up and solve this." The room went very still. Everyone understood the nature of what was happening. This was not a teaching moment. This was a demonstration. Whitmore was not trying to test Ezekiel. He was trying to expose him, to establish publicly and permanently the limits of what he had already privately decided was the young man's fraudulent confidence. Priya stared at her desk. Several other students shifted uncomfortably. One young man near the window looked at the equation on the board and felt genuine relief that he had not been called upon. Ezekiel was still for a moment. He looked at the board. He looked at it the way he always looked at things, not with anxiety, but with a kind of focused patience, the way you look at a landscape you are trying to fully absorb before you describe it. Then he stood up, picked up his notebook, and walked to the front of the room. "Before you see how this unfolds, drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have believed in you? Share your story. This channel exists because of moments like yours." He stood at the board for a long moment without writing. Whitmore had moved to the side of the room, arms folded, watching with the expression of a man anticipating the satisfying conclusion of an argument he has already won. Then Ezekiel began to write. What happened in the next 11 minutes defied the architecture of the room. He did not simply attempt the equation. He did not stumble through it or produce a partial solution and stop. He worked through it with a fluency that belonged to a different register entirely, not the register of a student working from memory or luck, but the register of someone who understood the deep structure underneath the surface of the problem, who could see not just the path but why the path was shaped the way it was. He made one modification partway through, a substitution that Whitmore had not seen before, a small algebraic move that opened a door in the problem and allowed the whole thing to resolve with an elegance that was, by any mathematical standard, beautiful. He reached the solution, set down the chalk, and turned to face the room. The silence lasted several seconds. Priya was the first to understand what she had just witnessed. She had taken graduate coursework over the summer. She knew this type of problem. She knew what it had just cost in terms of mathematical sophistication to do what Ezekiel had just done. She looked at him and then she did something that broke the silence completely. She began to clap. Slowly at first, then 2 other students joined. Then the whole room, not the enthusiastic applause of entertainment but the genuine, almost bewildered applause of people who have just seen something they did not expect to see. Whitmore had not moved. His arms were still folded. But something in his face had changed. The performance he had planned had not produced the ending he had written for it. He looked at the board. He looked at the solution. His eyes moved slowly over the substitution Ezekiel had made, the one he had not seen before, and something happened behind his eyes that was difficult to look at, the particular discomfort of a man confronting the gap between the story he has told himself and the evidence in front of him. After class, as students filed out, Whitmore sat at his desk without moving. Ezekiel packed his notebook and walked toward the door. He was almost through it when Whitmore spoke. "Mr. Owusu." His voice was different now. The authority was still there but there was something else underneath it. "Where did you learn that substitution?" Ezekiel stopped. He turned back. "I worked it out 2 years ago," he said. "I was trying to solve a problem in a number theory paper and needed a workaround. It took me about 3 weeks. Whitmore looked at him. 2 years ago. You were in high school." "Yes, sir." Another pause. Whitmore looked at the board, which still held the equation and its solution. "That approach," he said quietly, almost as though speaking to himself, is not in the literature. I have not seen it before. I know, Ezekiel said simply. I checked. What followed over the next weeks was not a dramatic transformation. Gerald Whitmore was not a man built for grand gestures of apology or sweeping moments of conversion. But he was, underneath the armor of his own assumptions, a mathematician. And mathematicians, when they are truly honest with themselves, must follow the proof wherever it leads, regardless of whether they like the destination. He began meeting with Ezekiel after class. At first with the guarded energy of a man conducting due diligence, testing further, still half expecting to find the seam in something that seemed too seamless. But the seam never appeared. What appeared instead, week after week, was a mind of extraordinary range and originality, a student who had not just learned mathematics but had lived inside it, who had spent years in conversation with problems that most students his age had not yet encountered, who had developed, in the solitude of a public library in Cleveland, Ohio, a mathematical intuition that Whitmore had seen, in 31 years, perhaps twice. He nominated Ezekiel for the university's undergraduate research fellowship. He wrote the letter himself, and he wrote it without reservation. He also, one quiet afternoon in November when the campus was half empty, said something to Ezekiel that was not quite an apology but was the closest he could manage. I made assumptions, he said, looking at his desk rather than at the young man across from it. They were wrong. I want you to know that I am aware of that. Ezekiel looked at him for a moment. I know, he said. And then, with a kindness that Whitmore had not earned and that said everything about the character of the young man offering it, he added, thank you for saying it. Ezekiel Owusu graduated 2 years later with the highest GPA in the mathematics department's recorded history. He went on to complete a doctorate at 24. The substitution he had written on that October Tuesday, the one Whitmore had looked at with such astonishment, was eventually published in a research journal. The acknowledgement at the end of the paper was brief and precise, in the way of someone who does not need the world to know how hard the road was, only where it led. It read, for my mother, who worked while I studied, and for every library that stayed open late. The numbers had always been there, patient and waiting, holding the shape of a future that no one else had yet imagined. Ezekiel had simply trusted them enough to keep walking.